Divrei Torah.
And welcome, everyone. And before we begin, I want to express my condolences to Jim on the passing of the Pope. Um,
Thank you.
I just sent out a note to a bunch of priest friends of mine. One of the things I learned is the term pontiff, I think, comes from the Latin for bridge, in the sense that the Pope is a is because the bridges in Rome, you have Ponte Vecchio and something. So that the and this Pope, I think, really was a true bridge of caring and compassion and humanity, and generally speaking, I think very well respected. So we were saddened to hear of his passing.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we are continuing our discussion of um, science and religion, and I'm gonna share the screen, and hopefully you can see it. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Let me get you guys back so I can see you. Um, and I'm gonna go from the current slide. So just to kind of, whoops, now I lost you. This thing makes me crazy. Okay, got you back. Okay, so and let's see, there's some things going on in chat. Okay. Oh, so basically where we've come a long way. So we've talked about, I would say, evidence from science for the existence of God, understanding the term God in that sense as being an organizing intelligence in the universe. And there, I think the evidence is overwhelming and compelling, but I still will call it evidence rather than proof. And then I always talk about two leaps of faith. Leap of faith number one is what I just discussed. Is there an organizing intelligence in the universe that I would call God? And then leap of faith number two is, does God care? And, the way I always express it is, does God care whether I, skipped bread for the last week or so for Passover, whether I eat ham or a roast beef for dinner, whether I'm kind to people or miserable and rotten to people? That, other than the total eclipse of the sun, which I probably spent too much time discussing, but I think is actual evidence from science of God's caring. I would say God's caring is strictly, at least for me, a matter of faith. Um, and then we jump to the question, which is, I would say, the primary barrier, as expressed by atheists, of why they have trouble accepting God, is the existence of um, of evil and tragedy in the world. And last time we spent a lot of time on the question of evil, and we discussed really the issue that evil is due to humans' free will. And humans are, I would say, genetically predisposed to wanting stuff for themselves, to greed, to which results in war and horrible things. Um, so evil, I see as a problem with humans, not a problem for God. People will sometimes ask me, where was God at Auschwitz? And my response is, it's the wrong question. The correct question is, where was humanity at Auschwitz? Um, so the bigger problem, at least theologically, in my opinion, is the question of tragedy. And by tragedy, I mean a something horrible that happens that you can't necessarily trace to a human choice. So, you know, an earthquake, tsunami, childhood cancer, my wife's Huntington's disease, and everybody has their own thing. Um, certain things you can quibble with. You can say, well, earthquakes, well, if we knew better how to build buildings, earthquakes wouldn't result in such problems, but so we have to learn. And and fires and so on. But broadly speaking, there is a category of things that happen in the world which result in, pain and suffering and death. And those I would describe as tragedies rather than evil. And in the world of religion, I'm just going to silence. And in the world of religion, the question of evil and tragedy, existence has a special name, and that name is theodicy, which you see on the slide here. So there is a wonderful treatment of this, which really is at the heart of Rabbi Harold Kushner's book, which is called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And there was a very nice formulation of this from Rabbi Ed Feinstein, who's a rabbi at Valley Beth Shalom in the San Fernando Valley. And so this presentation basically follows their thinking and their logic. So here it goes. According to logic, at least one of these statements must be false. God is all good and all just. God is all powerful. Bad things happen to good people. So I want to dwell on it for a moment. If God really is all good and all just and all powerful, then bad things can't happen to good people. Farah, I just want to mention I muted you because there was some noise in the background. I can actually ask, I think I can ask you to unmute. Hopefully you'll be able to do that, but I'm actually not sure. Yeah, okay, good, you did. So it may be that God is not all good and all just, but God is all powerful. It may be that at least one of these things must be false. Maybe all three are false. Maybe there is no such thing as God. By the way, if there's no such thing as God, we shouldn't really complain about tragedy in our lives. It's just bad luck. So this formulation helps me a lot. And you'll see where I come out on it. And I come out very much where Harold Kushner and Ed Feinstein come out. And I think most of you know the story, but Harold Kushner wrote his book in response to his son developing a disease called progeria and dying a horrible death at age 14. So he is asking the question, what is it that his son could have possibly done to deserve that disease? And led him to write his book. Okay, so we're going to look at these separately. So let's take a look at item number one. God is all good and all just. That might be false. And I would just say this is the God of leap of faith number one, the God of the philosophers. This is the God of the laws of physics. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about how there's an organizing intelligence in the universe that set cosmology into place and, you know, fixes all these constants in physics. The laws of physics don't care whether you're nice to children or horrible to children. The laws of physics basically don't care whether there's a hurricane or a tsunami. In fact, you can argue it's physics that causes the hurricanes and the earthquakes and the tsunamis. So sometimes this is described as the God of the philosophers. But I also want to point out that this is Job's conclusion. If you study the book of Job, people always talk about the patience of Job. The book of Job has 40-something chapters. The patience of Job lasts for 2 chapters. And then Job rants and rails against God and basically says, Job believes that God is inflicting the loss of his children's lives, the loss of his wealth, and his horrible illnesses. Job absolutely understands and believes that this is something that God has inflicted upon him. But Job argues over and over again that God is not good and just. So that's number one. Now I'm going to jump to number 3. So here's a statement: bad things happen to good people. That can be false in 2 ways. Maybe the thing isn't really bad, or maybe the person isn't really good. So in terms of the thing not really being bad, I'll give one sort of, I don't know if it's a trivial example, but a little baby is going to get his shots against measles. That's in the news these days. And from the baby's worldview, it's a good little baby. And now all of a sudden he has a pain in his tush because of the injection. From the baby's worldview, a bad thing has happened to a good baby. From our worldview, we would say it isn't a bad thing at all. It's it's going to save him from getting this horrible disease. On a broader level, people have gone through terrible things in their lives. And in many cases, this I can tell you from personal experience and talking to people, In many cases, people will say after having gone through a terrible thing in their life, while they wouldn't necessarily wish it on their enemies, in retrospect, it made them more thoughtful, deeper, more conscious of their limitations, and it was a good thing, you know. And then sort of in between, you can argue that, again, getting back into medicine, that experimentation on animals might be actually a bad thing happening to a good animal. You know, the poor little fruit fly that's undergoing tests, or the laboratory rat that's undergoing tests, hasn't done anything to deserve. Let's just take a simple one. A cancer is introduced into a laboratory rat, and they're going to test, you know, various treatments for cancer on that rat. From the rat's worldview, it's a bad thing happening to an innocent rat. From our worldview, it's not a bad thing at all. We're trying to cure cancer. So people will often say, you know, it's God is operating, and from our point of view, it may be a bad thing, but from God's eye view, it may not be bad at all. So that's one way this statement can be false. It's not a bad thing. And another way it can be false is the idea that no one is really good. So at the heart, I would say generally, at the heart of Christianity broadly is the concept of original sin. And, you know, I always talk about the fact that there's something like 40,000 different Christian movements, and they treat this question differently. But you've certainly heard Sunday preachers saying, you know, you're all sinners and so on. So if bad things are happening to you, it's because you're a sinner and you deserve it, either because the sins you've committed or because of original sin that you're getting from Eden. So those are two possibilities. Maybe the thing isn't really bad. Oh, and the Jewish take on that can be sins in a prior incarnation. Jewish Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics, believe in reincarnation, and they would say that if bad things happen to someone seemingly undeservedly, that maybe it's they are paying for sins that they committed in a prior lifetime. And by the way, another thing is, maybe the thing isn't really bad, is that you are going to get your reward in the world to come for sufferings that you have in this world. So in the grand scheme of things, it isn't really bad. I'll just say, from my own perspective, I reject this argument. Some things, you know, like a tsunami, like childhood cancer, like Huntington's disease, are really bad. And I don't believe it's because, you know, people that had this, take Rabbi Kushner's son, for example, that they were really sinful and deserved it. So that leaves only one option, and that is number two, the idea that God is all powerful may be false. And I'm going to look at this in some detail, and in quoting some items from the Talmud. I always talk about this very briefly, and so today I actually got the Talmud passages so we can take a look at them. So let me just finish this thought. Well, anyway, yeah, so let me tell you where we're going. In the Talmud, you will see some examples of basically statements that the world operates according to its own laws. Some idiot shoots a bullet in the air. The path of that bullet is determined by my old career, physics, not my new career, theology. So that nature operates under its own laws, and God either cannot or decides not to intervene in nature. So then the question is, what good is God? And I think Kushner, I always forget the exact title of his book. Kushner's book on this subject is called Who Needs God? And God's role then is as a teacher, inspirer, commander, friend, and companion. And now, because I've never done this before, and since I'm taking my time in this class, I thought I would look actually at the Bible and the Talmud. So it turns out there are only 2 commandments in the Bible for which you are promised a long life. Just to make sure. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. 2 commandments for which you are promised a long life. One is in Deuteronomy 6 and 7. Deuteronomy chapter 22, 6 and 7. And I'll just read it. If along the road you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or the ground with the fledglings or eggs, and the mother is sitting over the fledglings or the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. So mother bird is sitting there either over baby chicks or eggs. If you're going to take those for an omelet, you shoo the mother away. Let the mother go and take only the young in order. Oh, that's weird. Oh, that's really, well, I blotted out. Oh, that's so weird in my, I'm going to just send this to the back. Sorry about that. Yeah. Whoops. It says that you may, it says, let the mother go and take only the young, that you may fare well and have a long life. Leman yetiv lecha. And it actually says that things will go well with you. Farah, you're a Hebrew reader, or
Yeah, a little bit.
a little bit? Okay, okay. You're not one of my Israelis. So I would say this means Lema'an yetiv lach, so that it will be well with you, ba'avrachata, and I will bless you. I will bless your days. So that the translation is long life. Not a bad translation, but I never really looked at this before today. And then the other commandment for which you're promised a long life is from one of the 10 commandments: honor your father and your mother, that you may long endure on the land that your God, Hashem, is assigning to you. And that's actually a very good translation. Lama'an yarechun yamecha, that your days may be lengthened, al ha'adama asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach, on the land that Adonai, your God, is giving you. So those are 2 commandments that if you fulfill those commandments, you're specifically promised a long life. Everybody with me? Okay. So now we're going to look at the Talmud. And this is in Tractate Chulin 142a. And if you're in Sefaria, it's verse number 4. And there's a whole interesting discussion. I've just, talked about the essence of this. It occurred that there was one whose father said to him, climb to the top of that building and bring me fledglings, baby birds. And he climbed to the top of the building and sent away the mother bird and took the offspring, thereby simultaneously fulfilling the mitzvah to send away the mother bird and the mitzvah of honoring one's parents. But as he returned, he fell and died. So the rabbis are asking the question, he obeys both of the commandments for which he's promised a long life, and he dies. I can't remember how much of this discussion. There's a lot of discussion. The first part of the discussion is, I'm not sure I believe the story. And the essence of the discussion is, well, we always believe this particular rabbi who tells this story. Then there's a fair amount of discussion that maybe he was thinking evil thoughts while he was climbing to the top and shooing away the mother bird. And the discussion is, well, we don't punish people for evil thoughts. So the Gemara asks, didn't Rabbi Elazar say those on the path to perform a mitzvah are not susceptible to harm, neither when they are on their way to perform a mitzvah, nor when they are returning from the mitzvah? Some of you have gone to Israel, may have had the experience of someone giving you some money before you go. You know this?
Yes.
And so somebody gives you, let's say, like $10, 2 $5 bills. And with the thought, donate the $5 when you're in Israel, and then donate the other $5 when you get back home. So that means you're on a shaliach mitzvah. You're on your way to do a mitzvah or return from a mitzvah, and you have divine protection. So the Gemara finally concludes that it was a rickety ladder on which the sun ascended and descended. So you have this great theological problem, and the answer was it was a rickety ladder that broke. Okay, I'm going to show one more discussion from the Talmud. This is from Avodah Zarah 54b-15. The Baraita presents another matter that illustrates the same concept. Consider the case of one who stole a certain volume of wheat and went and planted it in the ground. By right, it should not grow, but the world goes along and follows its course, and the fools who sin will be held to judgment in the future. So ela olam keminchago. Basically, the God that created the universe presumably could cause this wheat not to sprout, right? This is not too big a job for God. But we know from experience that even stolen wheat sprouts because the world operates according to its minchag. Some of you who are Jewish may know the expression minchag. Minchag is the custom, like the custom of a synagogue, what you do. So the world operates according to its customs or its course. And you'll be held to judgment in the future. And another example, let's see, this one was in verse 16, 15 and 16 from the same tractate. Same concept. Consider the case of one who engaged in intercourse with the wife of another. By rights, she should not get pregnant, but the world goes along and follows its course. The same Hebrew. And the fools who sin will be held for judgment in the future. Once again, if a couple is committing adultery, if that woman has a baby, that's a huge problem. It's actually a huge legal problem for the baby because the baby is a mamzer. I don't necessarily want to get into all of it, but a mamzer, the child of a forbidden union, cannot marry another Jew, can only marry another mamzer. So it's a huge problem for this child who hasn't had anything to do with it. And of course, you would say, couldn't God prevent it from happening? The answer is no, the world operates according to its will. So this is the Talmud basically saying nature operates according to its rules, the laws of nature. And either God cannot intervene or God chooses irrevocably not to intervene. There's a whole very interesting theological discussion that we could have on one of those two things. But basically, that's the answer that that Rabbi Kushner comes up with. God is not all powerful. And let me see where I'm going next. Yeah, so I'm going to go. I should have just made another copy of this slide. So nature operates according to its own laws. God cannot or will not intervene in nature. This is the answer that makes the most sense to me. So God is not all powerful. Then you have the question of who needs God. I should have just popped Kushner's book on the screen. And so what good is God or who needs God? From this perspective, God's role is as a teacher, inspirer, commander, friend, and companion, but not as a puppeteer who can reach into planted wheat or a planted human seed and cause it not to be fertile. I'm gonna go back to, well, okay, I will. Any comment before we go on? Yeah, Les, and then Alan.
As I've said before, I don't think that God cannot. I think he chooses not to.
Yes, so I think I would always say my usual response to that was if God chooses not to, that makes God unjust because he's not rectifying injustices. But there was a whole discussion, one of our Talmud classes, I think, about the lesson of the flood and that after the flood, God basically says, I'm not going to bring a flood again. So God is going to choose not to intervene in nature. But I think that's a reasonable position. Alan and then Erwin.
Go to my unmuted. I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Go to number one again. One of the first screen you had. It talks about point one.
The Deuteronomy.
No, earlier, way back.
Oh,
yeah.
God is all good and all just.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my comment on this is that because God is all good and all just, we don't necessarily connect that statement, even if I agree with the statement, doesn't tell us what God's ground rules are about using his good and just. It implies that God will use those things for the benefit of humans.
No. I would say that's number 3. That's number 2. God is all powerful. So what I would say is that God is all good and all just, but either cannot or has decided not to intervene in nature for the good of human beings by monkeying with nature.
Well, I'm sort of with Len on less on this, and that's why I stay with one, because I think one can be true, but there's things about God that we don't understand, which is a principle I think we're taught in our tradition,
Right.
that there are parts about God we don't understand. So that's
Right.
why I like one.
Okay. So you don't believe that God is all good and all just?
Um, I Yes, because I don't understand his ground rules for being good and when to choose
Okay.
when to do it. And then I'll throw in the free will part, which comes up in some of the other points you made, but we don't. I don't want to. Well, I could
Yeah.
go. It's
So
good.
I'll
Free will.
repeat something I always mention. I once heard Rabbi Kushner, and I've actually studied with him a couple of times. He died a while ago, and he was being interviewed, I think, by Dennis Prager, and I think it was Prager that asked him, considering what happened to his child, doesn't God do things that we don't understand? And I love his response. He says, my plumber does things that I don't understand, but there's nothing about what happened to my son that I don't understand. But that's reasonable. That's Job. Job is saying, God, you did this to me. You're powerful. You were able to do this. I curse the day I was born, and I absolutely reject your justice. Yes, go ahead, Farah.
I think we accept the God completely, that he knows what he does and he has power for whatever he wants to do. So if something bad happened, we have to accept it the same thing. It is him, whatever he wants to do and does, and it is correct. But we cannot understand how correct
Okay.
it is.
So I think what you're arguing is that maybe the thing isn't really bad if we had God's perspective.
Yes, and I think we don't do the same things that God said. The first 10 commandment, God says you shouldn't have any other gods except me,
Right.
and shouldn't bow in front of any god. I see even it's something in the earth or in the up. Anyway, the Torah that we bring in the Shabbat out of the Hechal, it is something that we make it, and all of us bow in front of that.
So
Ask him something. So I think is not the same thing that God told us.
So let me just summarize. Maybe we were being punished for not being good.
Maybe. I don't know.
So that's actually right here. Maybe no one, or maybe this person is not being good. So what Rabbi Kushner says, he can't believe that his son's horrible life of 14 years of suffering could be punishment for something that he did. That's Kushner's reaction, and I accept that.
Yeah, I accept also, but I don't say that punish us because we maybe, I don't say accept, but we did something that he said is not right. But if we accept completely God, we have to accept anything that comes.
Oh, there's no question that we accept it. Now the question is, how do we understand it? And so I am now presenting my own take on this, which agrees with Harold Kushner. It's absolutely not consistent with traditional Jewish belief. And it's the reason I'm not a Kabbalist. The Kabbalists believe everything is going according to the will of God. And everything that's happening is really according to the will of God. I can understand that. I like to teach it. But if I believed it, I would not be a rabbi. I would not work for that guy. If I believed that my wife's Huntington's disease and all three of my children's Huntington's disease, one daughter dying about 2 months ago, and my two other children in a long, protracted death, If I believe that God was really in charge of that, I can discuss that intellectually, but I wouldn't work for that guy. So this is very personal to me. Erwin and Jim, and then Les.
But
I hope you can hear me.
Hold on a second.
I hope you can hear.
Yes, we can hear Erwin. Hold on. Pharaoh wanted to add something. Go ahead.
but I have seen many things in my life that it was a miracle. I couldn't understand that how this miracle accepted to me, you know. So
Right.
I said there is the God by myself that
Right.
does the things but rescue us.
Right. So, and I would never argue with someone saying that, but if you attribute that level of control to God, then you also have to say God controls who dies horrible deaths. And I'll give you a very personal example. Very early in my rabbinic career at Temple Nerami in Camarillo, there was a car crash with a bunch of teenagers. And kids were thrown from the car. Not everybody was wearing a seatbelt. And only one person died. It was the son of one of the founders of our congregation. Other kids were thrown from the car. They landed in the grass. They were okay. This one young man, David Gershader, hit the pavement and died. I have no doubt that the parents of the children that didn't die believed that there was a guardian angel or a miracle that saved their lives. So God intervened and saved their lives. But if you want to be intellectually honest about it, you would have to say God intervened and caused David to hit the curb and lose his life. I'm just
Yeah,
talking
you are
about,
right. I accept that. Yeah, you are right.
I'm just talking about intellectual honesty. So basically, I am searching for a theodicy that I can accept. I'm not necessarily presenting it as the Jewish theodicy, but it certainly has, you know, the backing of Harold Kushner, which gives me, it's not just me. Erwin, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to ask Rabbi Kushner, God bless his memory, and I asking you, what does God really want from us?
I think God has told us.
No.
If you hold on. You asked me a question. You have to let me answer before you can argue with me. That's one of my ground rules. From a Jewish point of view, God has in excruciating detail told us what God wants us to do. We call it Jewish law. And depending on how, you know, traditional you are, it goes from everything from not murdering someone to what order you should cut your fingernails if you really get into, you know, the world of the ultra-Orthodox. So particularly in Judaism, that answer is very clear. God has given us Jewish law. That's what God wants us to do. Yeah, now go ahead.
But
hold on, Erwin.
I know that God says the same thing as when he says, honor your mother and honor your father. He says that he doesn't want us to love him. He wants us to honor him.
Actually, that's not true.
And
In the hold on. Stop. In the V'ahavta, it says, you shall love Adonai, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your being. So we are commanded to love God. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. You're supposed to also honor God, but we are actually commanded to love God. Interesting question. What does love mean in that context? You know, another great Torah study discussion. But we're not commanded to love our children. We're commanded to love the stranger. We're commanded to love the neighbor, but we're not commanded to love our children. So okay.
And the children are not commanded to love us, just to honor us.
I'm sorry?
The children are not commanded to love us.
Yes, the children are commanded to honor. Right. Yes. Okay, I'm just going to go in the order people popped in on. Jim.
At the beginning, you said you talked about the various Christian denominations and said that
Mhm.
preachers would say that if something bad happens to you, it's because you sinned. I have never heard any Christian preacher say that. And Jesus was actually asked that. His disciples said, "Hey, that blind guy over there, who sinned, him or his father?" And Jesus said, "Well, neither." And then he referenced something that happened that was in the daily newspaper. Some tower had fallen over, and they all
Okay.
knew about it. And they said, "Those 12 people that died when the tower of something fell over, did they die? Was that because of their sins? Absolutely not."
Okay. Then I
Jesus
stand
backed it.
I stand corrected. Because you're more knowledgeable about
And
this than
and
I am.
our friend Father Heaney would say that regarding the car accident, he said that God never asks us to build cars and drive around in cars. So that's not
Yeah,
on.
I would reject that because God gave us a brain that allows us to do that. And the cars can be used for ambulances that treat people, or they can be used as race cars that can, just amuse us at the risk of our lives. So I would quibble with him on that. Les.
Yeah, the one where it says God is all good and all just, to me, I think the both of them go hand in hand because God, if he's being just, and I'm not talking about, I know the child and all that, it's just horrible, and I don't understand it. But if God is all good and all just, then he can't be he can be all good. But if he's just, he's not going to be good for the sake of being good. He's going to be whatever it is for the sake of being just. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I would say the Jewish understanding of God is all good and all just. Justice has to be tempered with compassion. So I don't have anything more brilliant to add about that. I mean, punishing someone who has done evil is good. It isn't a diminishment of good. So I accept the idea that God is all good and all just, but I don't believe God micromanages the world to control nature.
When he put he put nature, the laws into nature, like the wheat you were talking about is going to
Yeah.
grow, whether a thief or a good
Right.
person put it in the ground.
Right.
So it's almost.
I think we talked about this. Presumably, God could have caused Mrs. Hitler or Mrs. Eichmann to miscarry, so that baby, out of baby Hitler and baby Eichmann would have never been born. Presumably, it would have been within God's power to do that. But presumably, either God elected not to, or God could not control that. Alan.
That's tough.
So,
Farah, I will call on you.
You talked about the rule that we have from the God. It's 10 commandments and some rule in the Torah, but not the Friday night light. Not that don't eat the chicken with the milk.
Yes.
But these days, the Jewish rule goes with this one because they said those rabbis that bring these rules, they think that God is with them, something like that.
Yeah. So let me say what they actually say, and that is when Moses was on Mount Sinai, Moses got two revelations: the written Torah, which doesn't say anything about lighting Shabbat candles, and doesn't say anything about milk and meat other than the commandment not to boil a baby goat, in its own mother's milk. But Moses also got the oral law on Mount Sinai, and the oral law becomes ultimately the Talmud. And so all of those laws are really from God, either directly or indirectly through the rabbis. But the rabbis would never say, I'm not sure I believe them, but they would never say that we're making up these laws because we want them. They are saying we are using God's written law and oral law plus logic to come up with the remainder of Jewish law. You may not accept that, and I don't accept that.
Oh,
but that's the that is Judaism. That Jews count, as you may know, 613 commandments in the Torah, not just 10. And the rabbis add thousands more. But they added believing, this I believe, they added believing that these are really what God wants us to do. Alan.
So you did mention with the V'ahavta that we're obligated to love God, but I wanted
commanded to love God.
Commanded, but in the Ahava Olam prayer, I learned, or I believe it tells us that God loves us.
Yes, it does say God loves us.
So, and now this.
And the Ahavat Olam, I don't think is from the Bible. It's rabbinic, but okay.
I got the prayer book out, so I make sure I
yeah.
the right thing. But the reason I'm bringing it up is how it connects to our expectation of what God uses His love, or doesn't use His love of us in the way where this discussion kind of questions whether God chooses or fulfills His own the teaching that God loves us.
Yeah. So the question then is, and I'm going to get to this. Probably not tonight, but I'm going to get to this. What does it mean in our relationship to God to say that God loves us? And the way I'm going to look at that is by analogy. Let's just say you love your children, right? What does that mean? Does that mean you will give your children you will fulfill your children's every need? That you will never let them, be late on a rent payment, So I'm thinking about that as an analogy. Anyway, that's where I'm headed.
Some of it is out of our control, right? You can love your children, and you make some choices, but some of the ways in which you relate to your children are out of our control.
Yes. I would say that's true. Some of things are in our control, but we decide not to do them. For example, our kids have been lazy and they've been goofing off, and it is in our control whether we write them checks so they never suffer the consequences of their laziness. That is in our control. And, some parents might do that and some parents might not do that. But I'm actually going to use that as a model. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Let me get back to where we were. Maybe we will finish tonight. So yeah, here's the analogy. We'll probably run over a little bit, but we might actually finish tonight. So the question is, God, where have you been lately? Here's the analogy, and my apologies for those of you who've heard me talk about this before. I feel like I talk about it endlessly. So, analogy of a parent to a growing child. In infancy, parents work miracles from the worldview of the child. And the example I usually use is the child is crawling toward a fire, in a fireplace, something dangerous. And then from the child's worldview, all of a sudden they are being lifted up in the air. And I love this. I love my new computer because it follows me over here. This is software in my camera. It follows me over here. I just get such a kick out of it. Anyway, from the child's worldview,
God loves you.
From the child's worldview, he's been saved from the fire, and now he's flying through the air, plumped into his comfortable little crib, looking up at little birds singing songs, gets his diaper changed, has nice smelling powder put on him, and a warm bottle or maybe even a warmer breast put in his mouth to feed him. From the child's worldview, I would argue that it would seem like a miracle. Now, kid gets a little older and is now a toddler. And the parent tells the child, they live on a street where cars can come. The parent tells the child, if you play in the street, you're going to get hit by a car. Don't play in the street. Very simple commandment, right? The parent doesn't say, by the way, if you play in the street, there's a 10% chance that a car may come along and a 5% chance that the driver might not see you, leading to a 0.5% chance that you'll be hit by the car. No, it's very simple. If you play in the street, you're going to get hit by the car. Don't play in the street, or I'm going to, hit you to punish you. don't play in the street. Okay, so that's the toddler. Now the adolescents. And I always tell the story of my son, who was an actor. And right after he got his driver's license, he was invited. We were living in Westlake Village. He was invited to join an acting company in Hollywood. But of course, most actors don't make a living acting. So this troupe was working and, doing their thing on weekday nights. And so my son is going to high school. He's like 16 years old, maybe 17 years old. He's been invited to join this acting company. And he asked me if it's okay that he does this. And of course, I say no. And I explain to him all the reasons why he can't do this. He's got to do his homework, that's not used to driving at night and so on. Now, do you think my son's reaction was, "Thank you, Father. You are so much more experienced and wiser than am I. And I do appreciate your greater knowledge of the ins and outs of the hazards of my life. And I appreciate your insight and wisdom. And I reject what I wanted to do." You think that conversation took place? No. The bottom line in that congregation was, "Because I'm your father, that's why." Okay. Now, people have adult children, and we don't work miracles in their life. I often say, sometimes we can write a check, and it may seem like a miracle, but, those of us, all of us in this, here, know that that's not really the miracles that we would love to be able to work in our children's lives. But there's still value in the relationship. So now that's the mashal, here's the timshal in Hebrew. So here is my understanding of the Bible from this perspective. The miracles that we read about in the Bible, splitting the sea and the sun standing still and Balaam's talking ass and, you name your favorite miracle, manna from heaven, is our memory of our spiritual infancy. In our spiritual infancy, we believe that God did all of these miracles. And so I compare it to an infant's memory. The book of Deuteronomy, we talk about this a lot in other places and even here, is very simple. If you obey God, good things will happen to you. If you disobey God, horrible things will happen to you. And if you read the blessings and curses, they are horrible. Particularly the curses. The one that I always think about is, you will be so hungry that you and your spouse will fight over the flesh of your children to eat. I can't imagine anything worse than that. And
Is it in the Bible? Is in the Bible?
Yes, this is both in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus. Basically, blessings and curses. That you'll be frightened by the sound of a driven leaf. So the book of Deuteronomy is very simple. Obey God, good things will happen to you. Disobey God, bad things will happen to you. One minor problem is, it's not true. To me, it's like a toddler's view of the role of God. If you play in the street, you're going to get hit by a car. The fact of the matter is, the kid will play in the street, they're not going to get hit by a car most of the time, thankfully. People disobey God all the time, they don't get struck down. So it just doesn't happen. The adolescence, I see in the discussion of the book of Job, where Job is yelling and screaming at God that I don't deserve this, you're unjust. Job's friends come along and tell him that this is happening to you because you have sinned. But Job knows he hasn't sinned, and we know Job hasn't sinned. So Job demands that God show up and have a trial of Job versus God, where God is the judge, the jury, and the defendant. And in the end, God basically says, I'm God, you're not. How can you possibly understand my ways? But he also says your friends are wrong. The simple book of Deuteronomy explanation that you sinned, therefore you're suffering, is not correct. So I see that as adolescence. And now, post-Talmud, post-destruction of temple, even post-Holocaust, today the relationship that we have with God has value because of the relationship, the wisdom, the love, the caring, the counseling. That's the power of our relationship with God. It's not magical. Alan.
So you mentioned a couple of Deuteronomy things, but what goes through my mind is the morning blessing when we thank God for all of our orifices working.
Yes.
and parts of our body. And so I think it's connected to what you're saying, at least the way I'm thinking of it, is that if those things don't all work, then God is keeping those things from working and
No,
causing.
no. Okay, so this is a
Okay.
very favorite prayer of mine. I say it a lot.
Yeah.
And basically it says, God, you have fashioned humankind with wisdom, creating things that are supposed to open and close, and so on. It is known and revealed before your throne of glory, no pun intended, that if one of them were stuck open or one of them was stuck closed, it would be impossible to stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh and does so wondrously. It is a statement of gratitude.
Right, but
it's not.
If some of it isn't working and I'm incredibly uncomfortable, and then how do I connect to? Is it something that I did that God is punishing me?
No, so I would say that, I guess theology could say it could be something you did, like go on a binge that weekend, and so your body isn't working very well because of all the crap you ate or the drugs you injected or the you name it. So therefore,
Yeah.
you are being punished naturally by God or by nature, or it's just your bad luck.
Okay.
And I mean, I had problems, a couple of months ago. I'll just say urinary problems. I won't get into graphic detail, but it sure made me say this prayer over and over again. Now that I'm okay, but I certainly don't blame that on God. I'm 77 years old, and not everything works the way it should, and now it's it's working much better thanks to my going to a nice Persian neurologist who is helping me. So I would say that's God is working by commanding us to heal and study human biology and use our knowledge and resources to heal rather than build bigger and better weapons.
Not necessarily curses that you earned by your behavior, not necessarily.
No, I would not. It wouldn't even occur to me to think that.
Well, if I don't eat my fiber food regularly, that could be my fault, not God's.
Yes, right? Yeah. So I wouldn't blame it on God. Right.
I get it. Thank you.
Okay. So let's see. Maybe I'll try and finish this tonight. So what about religious wars? Some of you have heard me talk about this. We often hear the claims that the worst horrors, the worst wars were fought in the name of religion, and it's just simply not true. It sounds good, but it's just not true. So World War II resulted in the death of some 66 million people. Communism, some 100 million people. And by contrast, in the 400 years of the Inquisition, only about 5,000 people were put to death by the Catholic Inquisition, which was 1/2 day's work at Auschwitz. And I often talk about this wonderful book. If you ever want to give someone a gift, this is not the book to give them. The Great Big Book of Horrible Things. And it's a book about the 100 worst atrocities in history. And the Crusades ranked number 30 with about 0.7% of the number of deaths in the preceding 29. And the total deaths attributed to religious wars were about 10% or so of the total. So, and another great quote from Jonathan Sacks: the cure of bad religion is good religion, not no religion. So people will argue because of Islam or because of Jewish fanatics or you name it, crusades, that we should get rid of religion. And that's John Lennon. Imagine that there's no religion and so on. But the cure for bad religion is good religion, just as the cure of bad science is good science, not the abandonment of science. I love Jonathan Sacks. I'm not going to go through the, I think all of you have seen. Is there anybody here that's not familiar with the blind people examining the elephant? Erwin, you have your hand up. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I know that. I heard about that.
Okay, Erwin,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask you that what is your opinion that if after all these bad things, horrible things happening, and people know that religion is good for them, why is religion shrinking? Why people believe in God less and less?
I don't think people know that religion is good for them. I think there's a lot of people who believe that religion is something that makes me unhappy or uncomfortable, or it's ancient superstitious nonsense. And that's why I would say people are rejecting religion. And I think it's a problem. Les.
I just heard on the news today or yesterday that religion is on the increase now.
Yeah,
That
so
they're
I
starting-
don't know. I don't know what.
No, I'm just saying it sounds
Yeah,
like
okay.
it's starting to
Yeah,
come back.
and I don't know. And it depends how you define it. So anyway, just quickly summarizing, there's a Hindu legend of blind people examining an elephant, and they each are examining a different part of the elephant, and they come up with completely different descriptions. And so I always ask the question, which one of these people are telling the truth? And of course, they're all telling the truth. So what should they do? Maybe they should go to war, have a holy war about the nature of the elephant, and we'll see who lives. Or they might want to talk to each other and compare notes. So that's why interfaith work is such an important part of my life, that perhaps different religious traditions sense a different aspect of God, and in fact, we can learn from each other. And I add to this that the blind people hear the elephant sound, they all hear the same thing. And I would argue that the analog in religion is the golden rule, which has many different statements in many different religions, but the basic idea is human life is sacred, and don't do to other people what you don't want them to do to you. Or, that's Hillel's way of putting it, Jesus' way of putting it, is do to others what you want them to do to you. So that's my test for a kosher religion, a religion that acknowledges the sanctity of human life and asks us to treat others the way we want to be treated, is kosher. So moving to the conclusion of this whole discussion, does God care? For me, it's a true leap of faith. I don't find compelling evidence for or against, but I really do love total eclipses. But by making the assumption, putting on rose-colored glasses, that God cares, and the record of this caring is revealed religious texts, I bring myself into an amazing world of relationships with people and with God. As a result, I find my life enriched and more beautiful and meaningful, and I've had the great privilege of helping others. You know, I did 3 funerals in the last 5 days, and I believe I was helpful to people, including a 65-year-old woman who elected to die because she was suffering so much from cancer, an 80-year-old woman, and today I did a funeral for a 100-year-old woman.
Wow.
And Dayenu, in the words of the Passover liturgy, it's enough for me. It's truly more than enough for me to make the leap of faith that God cares. So, summarizing where we are, where I am, in deciding to live a religious life, I make 2 leaps of faith. One, that God, the organizing intelligence in the universe, exists. This one is easy for me because the science is compelling. And the second leap of faith, that God cares. And that's a pure leap of faith. And for me, I can make that leap of faith without sacrificing my intellectual integrity. And the result of my making that leap of faith is, I am certain, improving my life and the life of people around me. So people traditionally talk about, I can't remember whether we spoke about this early in the discussion, 4 models between science and faith: conflict, independence, dialogue, or integration. And my own position is even beyond number 4. I would argue that science and religion need each other. So Einstein said science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. And I would go further than Einstein. I would say religion needs science, that religion can't do its job without science. And if the purpose of religion is to make the world a better place, and clearly that's the focus of Judaism. Judaism's focus is not on spending life or spending eternity in the heavens and being rewarded in the comforting presence of God. That's nice. It might be true. It might not be true. The focus of Judaism is making this world better. If the purpose is to make this world a better place, then we had better understand how the world works so we can improve it. You know, my line always is, if I'm sick, pray for me, knock your socks off, but help me get to a doctor. You know, make me a chicken salad sandwich if I'm hungry. Help me get my medications, because that I understand is how the world works. And then I would also argue that science needs religion, that a world of scientific progress unchecked by religious ethics leads to mass murder and probably our extinction as a species, and maybe the extinction of all species. I can't remember if I wrote this out or I'm quoting someone. If science is to achieve its goal of expanding our understanding of the world around us and to make improvements in our way of living, humanity better survive the risks of nuclear, chemical, and biological warfare by learning and living by the ethical truths taught by religion. Science and technology are amoral. A knife can be used to murder or heal. The German scientific establishment, you know, 100 years ago was the most advanced and sophisticated scientific establishment of its time. In the Wannsee Conference that came up with this concept of the final solution to the Jewish problem, every attendee of the Wannsee Conference, Nazi conference, had the title of doctor, whether medical doctor or PhD. Each thermonuclear bomb has the explosive power of all the explosions in all the prior wars. 100 such explosions would end life as we know it. The US and Russia together have 10,000 such warheads, down from more than 60,000 in the 1980s. I believe the only barrier to the use of such weapons and other weapons of mass destruction is religious ethics. So my bottom line is there is nothing irrational about belief in God and the belief that God cares. And if we live our life as though God exists and cares, our lives are better and the world is better. If we are to survive and thrive, we better study both science and religion. And Dayenu, it's enough for me. And that is that. So.
Okay, thank you so much. I have to leave.
Okay.
I say thank you to everybody. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Pharaoh.
Thank you.
So we're actually done with this section. I think I'm going to, I have a presentation similar, sort of short presentation on Kabbalah. And I think the next set of Monday night classes is going to be on Jewish mysticism. And we'll go through Kabbalah, you know, carefully and slowly, as opposed to my trying to race through it the way I've done it in the past. But any other thoughts on?
Thank you.
On
Thank,
this?
thank you.
This was great.
Very good. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Yeah.
Very good.
You know, when you said, what does God want of us? Just personally, I think of the book of Micah. It says, oh man, you know what your God asks of you. Seek justice, strive for
justly,
mercy, and
love mercy, and walk humbly with your God.
Walk humbly with your God. Yeah, that's kind of what I use as opposed to 613 commandments.
Tim, I don't know if you know that in many, at least in many synagogues I know, that is posted in Hebrew over the ark.
Yeah.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. And by the way, when President Carter was inaugurated, he had his Bible open to that passage.
Wow.
I actually did a detailed analysis of that section of Micah in rabbinical school.
Oh, well.
So I studied that. Yeah, there are a bunch of summaries. Even Jesus was asked, I think, what's the most important commandments? And
Yeah.
I think what he said was love God and love your neighbor.
Yeah, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So there's lots of places where we summarize, and there's lots of Jewish statements that say this commandment is equal to all the other commandments combined. But still, we're going to cover those commandments and don't have a cheeseburger. And stay away from that Easter ham. Yeah, but I agree with you. certainly the Reform movement focuses on the prophets, like that statement from Micah.
Just
Um,
curious, Jim, what did you eat for ham? What did you have for your meal on Easter?
Flank steak, cowboy pieta, tortillas, and I was with a Hispanic family.
Nice.
George,
Californian Catholic.
yeah, there was no pork in it.
I heard a comedian saying Jewish guys are marrying Sephardic women, or Sephardic women marrying Jewish guys, so that they can eat rice and beans on Passover. It's complicated why we don't do that. And the comedian said, if you like rice and beans, marry a Mexican. I thought that was hysterical.
Nobody had. Everybody's lactose tolerant except me, so everybody had the milk substitute. I don't know if that's kosher, but that's all they had. I had whipped cream with the meat. So.
Yeah, the milk substitute. One of the questions is it kosher to have that with meat? Mm-hmm. And sometimes the question is it kosher to have it at all, even with milk? Because sometimes it's made with ingredients, tannins, or I can't remember. I am the worst cook in the world. But there are additives in milk substitutes, and there's a famous example of a conservative dinner where they were having this. They were having dinner as a meat dinner, and they had a dairy substitute for coffee, and somebody started reading the ingredients on the dairy substitute, and there was non-kosher stuff in it, and they freaked out. Yep. Okay, so next week, for the next few weeks, we will discuss Kabbalah, which again, leisurely, like we did what we've done for science and religion.
Nice.
So
What's
thank
Wednesday
you.
night?
Thank you all.
What do you have Wednesday night?
Wednesday night, we are going to be discussing the rules of Shiva.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm gonna just stop